Okay, so what have we learnt? We've learnt that I've just remembered why I don't like body filler. What a dusty, horrible process this is. Anyway, let's have a look at what we've got. I'll flip you around. So, the better corner. So this one here, you can see there's some rust through here. You can see this is that previous repair. It goes through here, through here. Now this is the problem, or one of the problems with lapping. So what that means is, rather than cut one piece of metal and then weld the other one to it where the joint is, this has gone over the top, so it overlaps the old metal. Now when you get that, they've ground the welds quite smooth, but when you get that, you're going to have a lip, a ridge between the new and the old, and you've got to make it flat, you've got to put body filler in there to make it smooth. So back here, I don't know, it's probably 1 millimetre thick back here, and I'm not going any further than that. Again, this is where the strip goes, so I've put this piece of tape to remind me that that's the top of the strip, because I don't want to damage anything above there, so that I can just paint up to where this line is, and away I go. Down here, in these areas here, I don't know, there was about 3 or 4 mil in some of those areas here, and it sort of dips and waves and bubbles and so on. Now, I'm not criticising anyone else's work, I just don't like body filler. I just, when I say that, let me justify that comment. You have to use it. You have to use body filler. As far as I'm concerned, there's not too many people out there that can weld and do panel repairs well enough that they can't put body filler over it. But by lapping it, you have to use more body filler. If you butt it, do a butt joint, you can get away with using less body filler. So what I have done, I went through pretty aggressively with an angle grinder with a 36 grit pad on it in the first place, and just ground until I found some metal, and then I stopped. I didn't want to grind into the metal. Then I jumped onto a 80 grit on my little angle grinder, die grinder, and I tried to relieve some of that so I can get down to the metal. I'm just trying to investigate what I can use and what I can't. Now, this is not desirable to me, but I'm going to work with it. So I'm going to come through like this, somewhere like that. I'm going to replace that whole corner. And down here, down here, just here, I'm going to replace this corner just here. The rest of it, I've seen it from the inside, the rest of it's actually good. I kind of knew that that was going to be the case, and I definitely knew that that was going to be the case. And I've seen what's in here, it's actually pretty good. I will inspect a couple of little bubbles, a couple of little spots here. I'm not sure if it's rust or if it's something else. It looks like it could be a spot, but I'll just, actually it's weld. That's the back of the weld that I've done. So I'm going to repair that. I took off the double-sided tape that was holding on the trim, and interestingly, it was really hard to get off the white paint, and just the blue paint just peeled straight off. So it's actually really smooth primer under there, so I don't think it was rough enough, not enough key when they've painted it. And I very carefully, or not so carefully, I cut around the double-sided tape with the razor blade, so that when I was peeling it, it didn't peel the paint off and continue onto the area that I want to keep. So I cut around it, so that when I peeled it off, it just came off in the shape of where I'd cut. And then I also razor blade away from the paint that I was trying to save, because you don't want it to peel off and just continue on. I will say there's dust absolutely everywhere here at the moment. So I'll mark this out. I'll mark this out. Oh, now you could make a mistake and assume that the corners of the doors are going to be square. Now they're not. You can see there, that's not square. And that's not square. You could also make the assumption that they're flat, and well, this isn't a good example, but they're not. They will always have some roll in them, like this. They could often have roll this way, along this way as well, so you need to check that out. But why I point the corners out, I'm not going to assume it's square. What I'm going to do, I'm going to make a template of the shape of it, and I'll say right hand side, left hand side, and that's what I'm going to shape my metal to, so that when I get it, I can put it in, and I'm not making a square panel that ends up coming out on a weird angle and not going to work. So let's get into that. transferred the templates onto some sheet metal, which I've cleaned up a bit, and I'll do the other side as well. But also what I did was, once I got the shape, then I also allowed about 12 mil, I guess, half an inch, for the lip to fold over. Because what I'll do, I'll fold that lip over. I'll fold that lip over before fitting it onto the vehicle, onto the door. So let's get that cut out. So I transferred my templates onto the metal, cut the metal out, and then I've transferred the area that I'm going to fold the lip over as well. So it's actually the inner edge there. I made it a bit narrow in the first place, but those scribe lines, that's where I need to fold it. And I've written on here the inside so that I don't accidentally fold it the wrong way. So I'm going to fold it towards the inside. And then over here, I've got this one ready to go. So I'm just going to pause for a second. I've got my template laid over the top of the metal, and I've already put a mark there where I can see it, and I'll put a mark just there where I can see it as well. But what I can't see is the corner. So what I'm going to do is get the intersecting point here and just put a centre punch mark, or about a hammer. Put a centre punch mark right where it intersects. Now I need to make sure that the template stays in the right place. Put that there. Doesn't have to be anything major. And then I've got a dent there, and that can be my reference point. So this dent just here, just from the centre punch. So that can be my reference point to the point that I marked on the outer edge in the first place. And the same, I have a mark just here that I marked in the first place from my template. Transfer that through. Remembering that this is actually the shape that I marked in the first place off my template, and then the lip that I've put on there is just something that I've transferred on afterwards. So the actual initial marking out that I did is what I want to work with, rather than the width of the lip, because I can trim that up afterwards. So I've got those ready to go. So what I am going to do, I'm going to cut these corners off on a 45-degree angle, and then what that will allow is that when I fold them over, the metal will have somewhere to go, and that'll become obvious later. If you've been with me for a little while, you'll know that I've got a little sheet metal folder, which I would typically use. But I'm trying to do this particular thing just by using, I guess, some pretty basic tools. So what we have is, I have the lines marked out for the flanges to be bent over. I'm simply going to do this in the vise. So I'm going to get this line here and line it up with the top of the jaw of my vise, and then bang it over to a 90-degree angle. And then I'll show you how to finish it after that. So I was intentionally showing you a bunch of different tools that I use there, or different hammers, a panel beating hammer, a claw hammer that you'd use for carpentry, and then a ball peen hammer, which is pretty typical to have in a mechanical workshop. Really doesn't matter, a hammer's a hammer. It's about the technique. Now, what I did do was do that slowly, and I did it progressively from one end to the next, one end to the next, and backwards and forwards. And then at the very end, I hit it firmly against the corner, along this point here, the arris, to square it up. Now I'm going to use that piece of steel that I've got there, which basically is just an anvil. It's a piece of steel beam that I picked up, so is the one behind it. And if you're Australian, you'll notice BHP, big Australian. So I've got a piece of steel that is the same thickness as the door skin, same thickness as what I'm using here. And because this, when it goes onto the door, needs to slide over the inner skin, I'm going to need to leave a gap in there the same thickness of the steel so I can slide it over. So I'm going to put this here and then fold it over. So it's important that this second piece of steel doesn't move. Well, it's important neither piece of steel moves while I'm banging this over. So I've got it firmly clamped in place. Again, just using this piece of RSJ. I'll revert back to this hammer because I've got it and I prefer it. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to work along progressively from one end to the next. Just keeping an eye on it that neither piece is moving. What I'm doing also, as I'm getting closer to it being flat, I'm hitting it and pulling the hammer back at the same time. Just helps to flatten it out. Now what we have here is a nice flat flange. And what we also have is a gap for the steel for this to slide over when I go to fit it. Now I'm going to do exactly the same process on this corner. Now what you may be able to see here is the reason I cut it on a 45-degree angle. When this piece folds over, it'll come in and it'll somewhat join up. There'll be a little bit of a gap there because this isn't a perfect 90-degree angle. So there'll be a little bit of a pie-shaped gap there, but that's okay. So I'll go and bend this other part. Now because I already have this flange bent in, if I go putting it in the vise, I'll end up squashing this in, which I could re-straighten it. But what I've done this time, rather than having the flange be the part that I'm bending over, I've got the flange in the vise right on my line, and I'm going to bend the top of it over. Now what I need to be careful of when I do it is that I don't distort the metal here. So I don't want to go belting it with a hammer because I'll leave dents in it. So I'm going to pull it by hand, and then I'm going to use a piece of timber to hit it to spread the impact and avoid denting. I have created a little bit of a distortion through here, but I should be able to bang that out on a flat surface. So you may be able to see, I think you'll be able to see, it's pretty obvious through here. So I'm just going to try and flatten that out first. Okay, so that's out. Now I can continue on with my fold. So I'll put you back on time lapse. Okay, so we've got that flange bent over in real time there. So you'll notice this gap just here. That's okay. Corners of doors are never pointy and sharp. They're always slightly rounded. So once we get this installed, we'll actually go through and grind that to a little bit of a curve so that clothes and things don't get caught on it, so it's not a sharp edge. And we will put a spot of weld in there as well. And then after all that's done, then we'll put seam sealer around after. So we'll epoxy prime, we'll put seam sealer, sealer head and all that sort of stuff. So all that's left to do now is see if it fits. So as far as the shape of it goes here, it is pretty much perfect. So it's exactly the same shape as what we need there, which is a good start. Got the lips there. Now I can see that the door rolls off. This rolls off more than it's supposed to because of this and work that I've done and so on. But it is a slightly curved panel as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put my piece of metal back in there so that this gap doesn't close up, and then I'm going to just roll this, and I'm probably just going to try and do it in a vise or over my knee or over a bit of pipe and just roll some shape into it, just a little bit. It could be a little bit hard for you to see from the angle that you're on there, but I've just put some curve there, and I quite literally just bent it, and it looks a little bit like it's not bent enough just here, but it's because this corner is bent down too far in my view. This is the line back here that I'm trying to eyeball, so I'm pretty confident that where I've got it there, that I've got the right amount of curve that I can come in through here. At the end of the day, this is all going to be filled with body filler, so it's a little bit hard for me to get the exact curve of what it's supposed to be because there's a pretty ugly reference point. But I'm happy that I now have a piece of steel that is the right shape, has the flanges on it, and has the right curve to it. So now I can decide how much of it I want to use, because I've made it a bit bigger than I need. And in fact, I'm going to use just about all of it. All I'll probably do is just cut off this corner because this metal's good here and it just saves me having to weld too close to this mount. So well, yeah, I think I'm going to come full size. Got my panel clamped in place where it needs to sit, and I've clamped it carefully, trying to ensure that I don't dent it. And then I ran around with a scribe. You could use a nail, anything basically, just to scratch a line into where it's going. Now the reason I'm doing that rather than a Sharpie marker or something like that is I want it to be as accurate as I possibly can. So I'm going to, I've got that mark. I'm going to cut slightly inside of that so that I don't cut it too big in the first place. And then I can trim this panel down just with a little die grinder with my sander, or I can trim this. but I'll creep up on it rather than rush up on it and make a mistake. So that's it sitting in place. That's the piece I took out. You can see the join there and so on. You can see where I primed behind it when I was in there before. So just here we're sticking out about 2 or 3 mil. Here we're sticking out about 2 mil. So this panel needs to move up and in. So I may have already overcut this a little bit, but we'll see. My scribe line is here, so what I've intentionally done is tried to cut inside the scribe line so that I can creep up on it. So we'll do that. This is tucked on to the lips at the moment. Shape through here, sitting a little bit proud, but it's also low here. That's low, this is proud. So I might just try and put a little bit more curve into it here. I'm going to try and get this out first. So you can see it's under a bit of pressure, so it needs a little bit more curve in it. It's actually contacting on that point there. So I just gave that a little bit of a clean up. This is where I had repaired it. And through here, there's all this gooey stuff in here, which I try and clean up as much as I can as I'm going. So yeah, those lips just slide over this part that I made previously, like that. And same down here. So yeah, let's start trimming this up. So I have that piece fit up. I'm very happy with the fitment there. What I was mainly concentrating on, well, I was concentrating on all of it, but my main reference was I was trying to make it so that it was straight along the bottom, because I know that it's curved along the side. So it actually works pretty well through there. You can see the curvature that is in the panel when I do that. So that's the natural body line. Through here, I'll be able to pull it all into place when I tack it so that it's all good. It will be a little bit high here, and I'll probably intentionally make it a little bit high so that I don't have to put too much fill through here, and I'll blend the fill out to what I want as the line. I'm really happy with the way it is around here. I can feel there's the lip around the bottom that's tucking in well. It actually took me longer to make this undersized than it did to make it the right size. And what I mean by that is I got it to exactly the shape that it needed to be to fit in there, and it fitted perfectly. And if I was TIG welding, which I've said before, I don't TIG weld, but if I was TIG welding, it would have been as I wanted it, because it was perfectly fitting. But for my MIG, I actually want about 1 millimetre of cut. I'll probably open up a little bit here. I want about 1 millimetre of open cut there so I can get penetration with my weld. So, as I said, it actually took me longer to make it undersized for my MIG than what it did to get it right for the TIG in the first place. But I'm happy with it. For what it is, it'll be good. Just put some weld through primer on there. Yeah, so it's a copper-based primer. I actually really don't like the stuff. I have trouble welding with it, but I want a prime in there, and I put some inside the door as well. This stuff doesn't burn off, which other primers do, and as you will have seen earlier, the red primer actually created some welding issues for me. So I've put this in, I'll let it dry, and then I'll start welding this on. I'll keep working on the other end while I'm waiting for this to dry. I'm going to start welding this in a moment. What I am ensuring happens is that I get this as flush as I possibly can. So right at this point here, I've got this clamp. I haven't got it on both because it wasn't lining them up. What I found was if I clamp just here, it pulls this panel down a little bit, and they are absolutely flush. If I ran a fingernail across it, if I had any, then it wouldn't catch. It's still high here and high and so on, but I'll move along from point to point. I'm just going to put some tack welds to get them in place. As I said, I need to remind myself that I'm going to work with it up to here, and then I'll probably pick it up about here somewhere. This part, I'm going to allow this to sit a little bit higher because this is the curve that I want, not this dent that's here. So I'll put you on time lapse and we'll move along with it. But I've got this all lined up and I've got my 1 mil. I'm really happy with it. Let's see how it welds up. Just before I go on, you'll see that I'm going to do it really slowly. A spot, a spot, spot. I'll let it cool. The idea is you don't want any heat in this that you can't touch because that'll be too hot and it'll distort the panel. If in doubt, I'll put some air on it. Well, that went well. So when I first started, I had one little blowout, so I turned my heat down, and then it was sitting a bit too high, the weld, so I gradually crept it back up again, and I realised it was just a thin spot here. So I did some tacks around in points. I got it where I wanted it to be. Then I put about 3 spots, and then I'd cool it down on 3 spots. I'd move from one spot to another, and I kept putting my ungloved hand on it so that if I could touch it, then I was happy with it. And like I'm touching it at the moment, it feels like it's been sitting in the sun for 30 seconds. So it's quite good. So what I'm going to do now is go through and grind those welds down. And it's really important to know that when you're grinding the welds down, you're only grinding the welds. You're not grinding the metal around it because the metal around it will become very thin. So that's part of the importance of getting your 2 pieces of metal on exactly the same plane. So I'll have to be careful here. I'm going to grind to this height here. I'm not going to grind to that height because I know that that spot there is a little bit lower. But everything else I'm pretty sure is good. Now there is a bow in the panel through here, but that existed before. So I'm using these sanding discs on my angle grinder just with a backing plate. So this backing plate just here, and these basically go on like that and then get held in place. And when I'm using it, I'm just going to be using the tip of the blade to grind that down. I'll start off with 36, quite aggressive, and then if need be, if I think I need to, I'll go down to 60, and then I'll probably jump onto my little die grinder as well. But what I'm not going to be doing is grinding the parent metal. As soon as I hit the parent metal, I will stop grinding. I know that there's going to be a pinhole here somewhere and maybe somewhere else, probably through here. So I'll grind it down. If I see pinholes, I'll go through, I'll just tap some weld on there, grind that, and that's done. Other than getting it sanded up for epoxy, that will be the last I need to do. Other than, I stand corrected, little spot on the back of either side of the flange just to weld that up and maybe in the corner. And I'll just round this corner off, put a dab of weld there, round it so that I've got a hard surface there rather than just metal, rather than just sheet metal. So let's do that. Unfortunately, I forgot to press play when I was just before I started grinding it down. But anyway, this is the end result. So this is that spot where I knew it was going to sit a bit high. There is actually a low in here, and other than that, it's pretty good. So got the line through there, line happening through there. We've got some curvature in the panel there, and as I said, there is a low in that spot there, and there's definitely a low in this spot here, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. That is all but done, other than the spot on the back where I need to get in for the seam. Not sure if we're going to be able to see. So I just need to finish off on the back there a little bit. Otherwise that piece is done. ready for this piece. There we have it. So you saw me do this one. You saw me prepare to do this one. Now this only had a little bit of rust here. It was knocked around, but it had this weld, this repair that went through here. So because my piece of steel was big enough, I ended up just replacing the whole thing, even though there was just this little bit of rust in the corner here. You can see the ugliness going on there. I thought, well, I shouldn't just patch over patch over patch. So I'm not doing the whole door. Like, it grates me not to be able to go through and do this whole thing and go through it, but I'm not going to. I'm just repairing the rust. So I've done this panel here, but what I did do was, rather than weld onto where that previous repair was, I went up a little bit higher and went through here. So I've got this ugliness through here. It's a big depression. It's going to be full of body filler and so on. It's going to be full of body filler up through here. There's going to be a bit in there. There's no doubt about it. But it has no rust there. It has no rust there. We fixed the hinges, which you saw us do, and I've replaced the bottom of the door. As far as I'm concerned, this door, metal-wise, is done. I tell a lie, I've got to flip it over and just finish a couple of little welds underneath here. Other than that, it's done. So the next thing that I'm going to be doing to this is preparing it for epoxy primer. We'll do that. We'll put fiberglass filler over the top of some of these, and we will do the finishing process. I don't know if I'll get to paint, but I will get to epoxy primer. We need to get this door so we can fit it back up to the truck to see how it fits, whether we've done what we needed to do, and so we can start panel aligning the front guard, and we can finish putting the sills in. I've never showed you that, so I will. So I think I'm going to wrap this up here. So I got mess everywhere. The whole place was covered in dust. We've got this to a stage that's finished. You've seen how to do some rust repairs. This has actually taken me a fair while. I'm not going to lie. It has taken me a good part of 5 or 6 hours to do this. But I'm sort of contending with some funny shapes and so on as well. So yeah, I hope it's been useful content. If so, then please, as usual, like, comment, share, subscribe, and as always, let me know what can I do to assist you. I'm happy to make videos on almost anything to do with cars to be able to help you along the way. So let me know and I'll do it. So this has been a long video, but thanks a lot. See you next time. So I hope you enjoyed that series on the rust repair on the GMC door. Pretty long videos. There's a fair bit involved with it. So I hope that you watched all the way through. Remember, you can always come back to a video if you don't have the time to watch the whole thing at the time. Not sure what we're moving on to next, but you can rest assured that sometime in the future on that door we will do body filler, paint prep, all that sort of stuff, and we'll get into paint at some point in time, but that won't happen soon. We're moving on with other things on that particular car, the GMC, and I will show you that as well. Next time, not sure, but we will probably go back to the International. So if you're curious, come back, see what I do next. See you then. Bye.